I would like to share with you the story of the brave and generous woman who founded the Ursuline School of Québec. Her name was Marija Guyart, also called Marie of the Incarnation. Marie was born in France in 1599 in the city of Tours. One night when she was 7 years old, she had a very important dream. In this dream, Marie was playing with a friend in a school playground. Her attention was drawn to the sky, and looking up, she saw the sky open up, and Jesus appeared, walking toward her. When Jesus stood before her, he asked, "Are you willing to be mine?" Without hesitating for a moment, Marie replied, "Yes." When she woke up, her heart was so filled with joy and love that she wanted to share the beauty of this dream with everyone who would listen. The dream also filled Marie with the desire to be of service to each person that she met, and to live always in the presence of Jesus. When Marie grew up, she wanted to give herself completely to Jesus as a nun. A nun is a woman who has consecrated her life completely to God and to God's service. Nuns live together in a large house called a monastery. Marie's parents did not think she would be happy as a nun. She was such a lively girl who loved being around people, and nuns spend a lot of time in prayer and in silence. Instead, they encouraged her to marry a handsome man named Claude Martin, a skilled silk merchant. Almost a year after their marriage, Marie gave birth to a little boy whom they named Claude, like his father. Sadly, 7 months later, Marie's husband Claude died, leaving her alone with their little son. She also discovered that her husband's business had not been doing well for some time, and there were many bills that needed to be paid. And she was able to pay the bills and managed to take care of the needs of Claude and herself. Everyone around her was impressed with her skillfulness and honesty. Marie's brother-in-law had a large and very successful transportation business, and he was so impressed with Marie's talents that he asked her to manage his business for him. The experience that Marie gained at this time would prove to be a great blessing for her later in her life. One day, when she was going about her duties, she experienced another powerful vision. This time, she saw herself being washed in the blood that Jesus shed on the cross out of his love for all people. This unusual and special experience enlarged Marie's own heart, and she began the practice of always asking forgiveness of anyone that she had felt she had hurt. She wanted to love like Jesus loved. Her son Claude began to grow up, and it was a great joy for her to teach him about God and Jesus' love. She still felt very strongly the desire to become a nun and give her life completely to Jesus. Marie often visited a friend who was already a nun at the Ursuline monastery in Tours. When Claude turned 12, a time when a boy was close to becoming a man, Marie told her sister of her plan to finally enter the monastery, and asked her to take responsibility for Claude's education and care. This was very upsetting to young Claude, and he ran away. He was missing for 3 long days. Eventually, he was found in a nearby town, hiding under a bridge. Marie did her best to comfort her dear son, reminding him that he could visit her in the monastery parlor often. In fact, a few days later, Claude and a group of his friends arrived at the monastery gate, armed with sticks and rocks. Claude shouted angrily, "Give me back my mother! Give me back my mother!" As you can imagine, this caused Marie great pain and sorrow, that her decision to become a nun would cause her son so much suffering. In spite of it all, Marie knew deep in her heart that she was doing the right thing. Claude would be well taken care of by his aunt and uncle, and she was fulfilling the promise she had made in her dream many years ago. She was saying her yes once again by remaining in the monastery and entrusting that God would watch over her son in her absence. Sometime later, Marie had another important dream. In this dream, she was walking with a friend who took her by the arm and led her up a steep stairway. On the roof of the chapel, they found the Blessed Virgin Mary seated on a large chair with the infant Jesus in her arms. From outside the chapel, they could see the countryside below, full of mountains and valleys that were covered with a thick fog. After this dream, Marie's desire to make Jesus' love known to the whole world became even stronger. But she was not yet sure how or when this could happen. Until one day, when Marie was praying, she heard God's voice say to her, "The country that you saw in your dream is Canada, and I am asking you to go there to build a house for Jesus and Mary." But how would this be possible? To travel to Canada by ship would be very expensive, to say nothing of the cost of building this house for Jesus and Mary. As of yet, there were no nuns who had traveled to Canada. Mary knew in her heart that if this was God's will, it would happen in God's own time. All of a sudden, things began to happen. Marie was introduced to a wealthy widow named Madame de la Peltrie, who wanted to contribute her money to found a school for girls in the new settlement in Quebec. Marie realized this was the lady that she saw in her dream. Together over the next few months, they began to plan and organize the journey, and at last the day of departure arrived. The trip took 3 long months. With many dangers, storms, pirates. The boat even almost hit an iceberg. But they finally arrived. Marie of the Incarnation and her companions arrived in Quebec on August 1st, 1639. It was a moment of great joy for the 250 people who already lived there. The Ursulines immediately set about learning the languages of the First Nations people so that they could communicate with them and teach them. In the beginning, they lived in a very small house that only had 2 rooms. They taught the first students in the kitchen. Eventually, a beautiful monastery made of stone was built in the upper town. The school was moved to the location where it still stands today. At about the same time in France, Marie's son Claude decided to become a Benedictine monk and a priest. She was delighted to have a son who was a priest. Claude asked his mother to write to him often and to tell him about her life in New France. Marie gladly wrote to him of all that was happening in the new colony. She also shared with him all the wonders God was working in her and in New France, and of the many signs of God's love she experienced in prayer. And of course, she told him about life in the small Ursuline school with its students, both French and First Nation. She enjoys telling him about their pranks and their jokes, like the time she found a shoe in the soup, or how they sometimes climbed over the fence to go play in the woods. She didn't scold or punish them. She knew that it's part of who they were, and she wanted to gain their trust. Marie wrote thousands of letters, mainly to Claude, but also to many other persons in France. On 1650, the school and monastery were completely destroyed by fire. Everyone was saved and managed to escape, but everything was completely destroyed. All of that hard work destroyed in a matter of hours and minutes. Madame de la Peltrie's little house became the temporary monastery. Because it is so small, it was impossible for a school to be there. The Algonquins built a portable school made of birch bark and poles. During the next 2 years, Marie worked very hard with the help of all the residents of Quebec to rebuild the school and monastery. Marie of the Incarnation loved to teach, and she did so all of her life. Her favorite spot in good weather was in the garden, in the shade of a large ash tree. While in Quebec, she learned 4 of the languages of the First Nations people, and at the end of her life, she wrote dictionaries of their languages, and wrote stories from the Bible and of the lives of the saints to help the nuns in their teaching. On April 30th, 1672, Marie of the Incarnation died, surrounded by her sisters and her students. 350 years after her death, her spirit of dedication and service live on in the Ursuline School of Quebec, which is her great legacy.